All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us on our next Lunch and Learn webinar, A Golden Opportunity, Multi-Benefit Floodplain Habitat Restoration on the Lower Yuba River. My name is Alex Bosch, and I'm a Public Information Specialist here with Yuba Water Agency. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items that I wanted to go over. This webinar is you're able to watch it both here on Zoom as well as on Facebook Live. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A box on Zoom, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end. We are recording this, and that recording will make available within 48 hours after the webinar. And please sign up for future updates at yubawater.org and follow us on social media at Yuba Water. So to kick it off, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Jeff Matthews is our Senior Project Manager here at Yuba Water Agency. He's served as a project manager for the Hallwood Side Channel and Floodplain Restoration Project since 2020, which is a project that you'll hear more about during the webinar. Over his 30-plus year career, Jeff has worked in the public and private sectors, delivering land rights and habitat values needed to fulfill permit obligations for projects across the Western United States. In 2018, he retired from the California High-Speed Rail Authority, where he served as acting director and deputy director of real property. Our next panelist is April Sawyer, who is a senior eco-hydrologist at cbec Eco Engineering. She is also a project manager for the Hallwood Side Channel and Floodplain Restoration Project and has been involved in the concept, development, design, permitting, monitoring, and project implementation since 2012. She has a background in fluvial geomorphology and hydraulic modeling to assess salmonid habitat suitability and restoration design alternatives. She enjoys working on multidisciplinary projects crossing the physical and biological domains. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to kick off the presentation.
Alex, thanks a lot, and thanks to everybody for joining us on your lunch hour. We think we've got something that's both informative and entertaining today, and hope we all learned something from this. At any rate, our agenda today, we'll talk a little bit about the Yuba Water Agency, some of our history and our goals, and then specifically we'll focus in a little bit on historical impacts of gold mining on the river and some of the effects of that and what we're left with to help restore some of those impacts of those habitats. Given that as well, we have fisheries challenges that you hear about on the news and throughout the state, that fish are challenged, they're struggling, and the work that we're doing to help ease some of that struggle. And then finally, we're going to focus on specifically the Hallwood Side Channel and Floodplain Restoration Project, what we're doing there and how we're, as a multi-benefit project, how we're addressing many issues within the Yuba River and Yuba County. So I think it's important that we first start off with Yuba Water and what our 5 core areas or key mission areas are. You know, when the agency was first conceived, it was primarily a project to provide flood risk reduction after a number of floods hit our area over the many years. There was definitely an effort needed to reduce flood risk reduction. So that was part of the genesis of our agency, as well as providing a sustainable water supply for agriculture. Agriculture is one of the key economic drivers in Yuba County. We need to have sustainable water for both ag and for people as well. Concurrently with that is hydropower generation, taking water down to our Colgate power plant and our other power plants, providing power for 300,000+ homes in our area. And of course, the area we're going to focus on today is fisheries protection and enhancement, why having a healthy fish population is so important to our system. And then finally, there's a photo there of a person enjoying New Bullard's Bar and water skiing, fishing, hiking. It's a great destination for so many folks. All of these key mission areas are important for us to stay focused on as an agency. We're going to kick off a little video that we produced about a year and a half ago, I believe, that highlights some of the things I mentioned earlier and talks a little bit more about our Hallwood project.
Piece by piece, thousands of tons of rocks are on the move, part of a landmark effort to make the lower Yuba River a friendlier home for threatened fish species.
The goal of the project is to create and enhance spring run and fall run Chinook salmon and Central Valley steelhead habitat on the lower Yuba River.
What we're talking about here and what we're really hoping to achieve is a pretty dramatic change from what the landscape looks now and what the river looks like today.
Work is well underway on the Hallwood Side Channel and Floodplain Restoration Project, a central part of one of Yuba Water Agency's key missions, investing to improve and restore fish habitat in the lower Yuba.
We take that responsibility very seriously. We want to be part of and help fund restoration projects up and down the system.
Historically, the lower Yuba supported thriving Chinook salmon and Central Valley steelhead fisheries, but populations dwindled as the river was highly altered. During the gold rush, sediment from hydraulic mining flowed downstream, raising the riverbed. Then Invertebrate Dam, now owned and operated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, was built by the California Debris Commission to hold back that hydraulic mining debris.
It made it easier for gold mining to occur. However, it caused quite a bit of damage to the river, and we're still feeling the effects of what hydraulic mining did to our fisheries.
This project is in some ways still taking a lot of those same tools, the excavation, the removal of material, but the goal is the exact opposite. It's really thinking about how can we help this ecosystem really sort of try to reintroduce some healthy processes and some healthy habitats to the lower Yuba.
Tall embankments called training walls, gold rush remnants that disrupt the floodplain and the water's natural flow are being taken out. Side channels and historic habitat are being recreated, ecosystem enhancements to boost fish populations and reduce flood risk.
For the county and for the community, it's just an amazing, amazing project that will have benefits today, tomorrow, and for many years to come.
It's a project with multiple partners and multiple benefits. Some 3.2 million cubic yards of material will be hauled out by Tykert, processed at their facility next door for construction projects all over the state, cutting costs significantly for this project.
In the 30 years I've been involved in public works projects, I can't think of a better example of a public-private partnership than this enhancement work we're doing here in Hallwood.
This project is a testament to that you really can bring a lot of different groups that have the same goal into a room and really figure out how to make something impressive and big happen like this project.
It is incredibly rewarding to see this happen. It is a chance of a lifetime to be involved in this.
Piece by piece, a transformation helping both the environment and the people of Yuba County.
So I hope you enjoyed that video. It certainly was a lot of fun to make, and it really kind of solidifies and sets a good foundation for us as we dive a little deeper into the details of how the project evolved and how it's been constructed over the phases and what we've seen in terms of some of the results of the habitat enhancements. So diving a little deeper, so what is fish habitat enhancement all about? Well, here at Yuba Water and our partners, we've talked about, we're working really diligently to help restore and protect wild salmon and steelhead in the lower Yuba River. And we've been part of this for many years through other efforts, but this is the first major habitat enhancement project, major one that we've done. So some of the specific actions that we've taken in the past have been providing cold water flows, and you really can't overemphasize how important it is at certain times of the year for fish to have those cold water flows. There's an old saying in fisheries that fish need clean, clear, cold, and connected waters. It's best for their survival, and so through the Yuba Accord and other actions, we've been working on that. We've also been working on funding on other habitat restoration projects and taking, not just funding them, but then gathering data and funding research that can be shared up and down the state. the Yuba River and other rivers have their challenges, and we want to be able to share what we've learned as lessons learned with other rivers to help promote recovery of salmon and steelhead throughout the state. Having good working relationships with all of our local, state, and federal partners, especially in this project, have been critical throughout the permitting phase and implementation. And then finally, I mentioned earlier about the Yuba River Accord. It really helped set the stage in a landmark fashion how varying interests can get together and coordinate flow for the benefit of agriculture, for fish, and for other needs. So there are ways where we can all come together and come up with solutions that really are beneficial to all of us. The video talked a little bit about hydraulic mining, but we wanted to take another look at it and just kind of focus in on some of these dramatic videos where you see these are called monitors, these large water cannons, and through a system of flumes, water was transported from high in the Sierra through gravity and through necking down this system. Immense pressure could be applied to these hillsides, and Malakoff diggings, our Blue Point mine property, you can see remnants of these just hillsides washed away. And after the gold was extracted, much of this material, a good portion of this material, ended up in our river and has raised its level, and it really caused tremendous amount of havoc, as they say, downstream. I've been told that more material has been moved through this process and through the work in the gold fields than was done to build the Panama Canal, for example. So a lot of material has been moved in the search of gold on the Yuba River. So California and really throughout the West Coast, we're experiencing challenges to our fisheries. You read about it in the paper, you see it on the news, but fish populations are declining over time, and through efforts like this project, we're hoping to increase those fish populations, and so that we have returns year over year. Some of the things we can do that are within our control are habitat projects. Some of the things that are difficult for us to control are ongoing drought. If you've lived in the West and you've read about the history of the West, drought is something that we've always dealt with, and it seems to be exacerbated in recent years through climate change and what's happening to our systems. So water is not falling as much snow as what it once was. It's falling in the form of liquid water. And so how do we take care of it? How do we move it through the system? There have been challenges. And through drought, then we end up with habitat loss. Again, a focus of our project is to restore some of the habitat loss that's been affected. We've had also just overall wetland habitat loss in the state through development. That's been a cost of development of California, is losing a vast portion of our wetlands. And finally, some of the other fisheries challenges really have been as a result of predation. Some fish, big fish eat small fish, to make it simple. And so this project does address predation issues, and April's going to talk a little more about that in a few minutes. So before I hand it off to April, let me focus in on the project site. Here we have a view of a plan view of the map. So the project area is adjacent to Teichert's aggregate processing plant on the lower Yuba River. You can see Marysville in the bottom left-hand corner. Daguerre Point Dam is up near the top right-hand corner. And essentially, this project is really in the heart of the gold fields, and where work has been done for over 100 years to mine and process both gold and aggregate materials. We've talked somewhat about these training walls, and April's going to talk a little bit more about that, but these training walls are about 100 years old and essentially created a bit of an impediment to flow. And so one of the major goals was to remove this training wall for many reasons, including to benefit fish. So The three primary goals of the Hallwood Side Channel and Floodplain Restoration Project are to, one, restore and enhance ecosystem processes for juvenile salmonid rearing habitat. So that includes both cold, clear water, shallow water, and help provide a food source for these small fry that are growing and help them be better prepared for their journey through the system out to the Pacific Ocean. Through that, another goal is to increase the natural production of fall run and spring run Chinook, salmon, and steelhead. Those are specific species that under some of the most pressure that for survival that we feel that this project is going to help. And then finally, this project does, through the removal of these training walls, will help reduce flood risk by lowering water surface elevations by as much as 3 feet. And again, stealing a little April's thunder, she'll get into that more coming up.
All right.
Now,
Thanks, Jeff. I'll take it from here. So this project has many funders, stakeholders, and it's been a fantastic public-private teaming partnership example that we think can be utilized across not only California, but throughout the United States. It was originally funded by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, an anadromous fish restoration program to address the Central Valley Project Improvement Act's doubling goal, CVPIA, to double the natural production of anadromous fish in Central Valley rivers and streams. And that was funded through the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation at the time. Tykert is the key landowner and is our implementation contractor at the site. And we've really been, forming and keeping a close relationship with them, and they've been great to work with. cbec is the prime consultant, so we've been in charge of doing planning, overseeing permitting, helping with permitting, doing the design iterations, plan drafting, and helping oversee implementation. And then we're supported by our subs, Kramer Fish Sciences, who've been doing the biological kind of oversight on the design, biological monitoring, and permitting as well. And then South Yuba River Citizens League, who have been supporting monitoring, implementation of planting, as well as stakeholder outreach. And so, the project is also funded by a couple additional grants, specifically the Wildlife Conservation Board Prop 1 grant, as well as the Natural Resources Agency Prop 68 grant. Next slide. So just a little bit more about project funding across those different funders. The project was developed. I'll go a bit more into timeline in another slide coming up, but project was developed under supported with funds supported by Central Valley Project Improvement Act, CVPIA, from 2013 through about 2020, and then we began implementation, and Fish and Wildlife Service supported phases 1 and 2 implementation. The Prop 68 and Prop 1 grants are supporting phases 2, 3, and 4. And Yuba Water Agency has been supporting implementation of all phases 1 through 4. And so all in all, the project is approximately, we're projecting it to be about a $11.9 million project, spread out across those funders. And if we break that down on a per acre cost, we're implementing 157 acres of enhancements. So that's about $76,000 per acre, which also includes 4 years of post-project monitoring. And it's really quite cost effective, particularly because we have this public-private teaming partnership with Tykert, because they're able to provide an in-kind contribution to remove the hydraulic mining sediment from the floodway at an estimated cost of about $75 million, which really makes this project economically feasible. Excuse me. So this project was designed with the mindset that removing unnatural constraints on river processes like lateral connectivity will yield the greatest benefits. Kind of just step out of the way and let natural river processes take over again. So this graphic shows a typical cross-section on the top of our pre-project or prior conditions, and on the bottom of our post-project or what we're working through right now conditions. The main channel is on the left, and the perennial rearing channel or historic overflow channel and floodplain is on the right, with the middle training wall running down the middle of the site. And on the top graphic, you can see kind of two mounds sitting in the middle of the floodplain. And a key habitat enhancement action is working with the landowner and aggregate processing facility at Tykert to remove that gravel and cobble from the middle training wall and other high elevation floodplain areas to increase the frequency and duration of inundation for juvenile rearing fish. Also carving in a network of perennial channels, and all of this is intended to increase lateral connectivity to inundate these areas during times when juvenile salmonids are going to be on the floodplain. We're estimating between January and June of any given year. So they can grow bigger, avoid predators, and kind of complex habitat before they go out to the ocean. We also raised the bed elevation of large ponds at the downstream end that had been harboring predators in the past to exclude those predatory fish and hopefully help benefit the juvenile salmonids. We are performing riparian planting, and lowering the floodplain is also hypothesized to help facilitate natural riparian vegetation recruitment because we're that much closer to the groundwater and the roots can really take hold. In addition, we are placing some large wood structures at the site. Next slide. So here we can see the topographic gradients at the site, and of particular interest is the middle training wall, which runs about 2 miles along the length of the site. This is a digital elevation model, and the warmer colors are higher elevations and the cooler colors are lower elevations. And so that middle training wall feature kind of bisects the entire floodplain, with the main channel on the south side of it and the historic overflow channel to the north side of it. And it sits anywhere from 40 to 100 feet above the surrounding floodplain elevation. So it's a very kind of significant feature on the floodplain that we're able to utilize as part of our habitat enhancements by removing. Next slide. So what are the enhancements that we're doing out there? So we utilized some different tools to be able to look at this. And so to analyze, evaluate, and refine our grading designs, our habitat designs, we use 2D models to simulate hydraulics and then post-process the results. Here we're looking at post-process results of habitat suitability for juvenile Chinook for the full project build out for the flow of 5,000 cubic feet per second. This flow is estimated to occur for about 21 days every third year during the time period when we expect juvenile fish to be out there, so January to June, and is also the approximate bankful flow of the Yuba River. So we take a look at the depth and velocity to each individual small cell within that model, and we can calculate the habitat suitability. Is it suitable? Is it not suitable for our target species and life stage? Colors of blue or cooler colors are suitable, and colors red and yellow or warmer colors are not suitable. And so note that the main channel on the south side of that middle training wall feature essentially is reds or no color, meaning it's not suitable at all. And in the footprint of the training wall where it's been removed, as well as along the edges or margins of the perennial channel that we're constructing, those are showing up as blue. And the intent here is to create more shallow edge habitat for fish to eat bugs, avoid predators in deeper water, and all that kind of under the cover of a developing riparian vegetation margin there. So all in all, the project creates or enhances 157 acres of floodplain and riparian habitat. We created or enhanced 1.7 miles of perennial channels are connected to groundwater all year long. 6.1 miles of alcoves, seasonal side channels, and swales that inundate at varying flows to increase habitat complexity out there. we're removing 3.2 million cubic yards of sediment as the video described. And that also has the benefit of reducing the water surface elevations out there for a 100-year flood event by up to 3 feet. And just for a little perspective on what a 100-year flood event is, that is the flood event that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year, statistically speaking. Next slide. So a bit more about our timeline. We began sketching out concepts. What could we do given this opportunity with the landowner way back in 2012, and cbec was awarded the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service grant in 2013, and we began reaching out to stakeholders, forming our teams, collecting pre-project monitoring data of 2014 to 2016, working through the design, which took several years to get things kind of worked through, as well as permitting. Through 2018, contracting took a couple years as well to get us to 2019, and then at that point, Yuba Water Agency joined the team in 2019 and became implementation lead, and that's where we began construction. So phase 1 was constructed in between 2019 and 2020. Each construction year, we can do the work approximately from April to November in any given year. So we had to take a phased approach and break up those 157 acres into bite-sized pieces. So phases 2 through 4, we completed phase 2 last year. We're doing phase 3 this year, and we aim to complete phase 4 next year in 2023. Next slide. So phase 1 began with rough grading in 2019, and we got started by removing the middle training wall, just kind of getting some of the material out of the way. And then in 2020, a large portion of that habitat was created or enhanced during the 2020 construction year. And between 2019 and 2020, we removed 1.2 million cubic yards of sediment, and we completed the perennial rearing channel that's connected to groundwater throughout the year. And 89 acres of the 157 acres of habitat enhancements. The image on the left is showing some scrapers and motor graders, etc. And on the right-hand side, we're showing the material moving to the plant on the conveyor belt. So this is a drone image comparison of before we connected to the perennial channel to groundwater, and after we connected the perennial channel to groundwater. And you can see particularly the middle training wall in the top image off to the right that is now gone once we completed the work in 2020. So we have that increased lateral connectivity as well as connectivity to groundwater, bringing water in from the upstream end. We also retained existing riparian vegetation to the extent possible to help seed the site, as well as provide shade and alcoves that we kind of connected to that perennial channel. And then we get back to the main channel. Okay, now it's looping. So phase 2, moving upstream, was actually we were looking toward phase 2 at the end of that drone imagery. In phase 2, we removed more sediment. We removed 800,000 cubic yards. We did 34 acres of floodplain and seasonally inundated side channel habitat additions, and also planted pole plantings within the phase 1 work area and the phase 2 work area. And we also reconnected the main channels to the floodplain, which we'll see in a cool time lapse on the next slide. So this time lapse is showing the removal of material from June through December of last year. Off to the left-hand side, off of this screen, there was a hopper, which was the start of the conveyor belt and takes the material to the plant. We see all the machinery out there, removing the material and then doing the fine grading to take us down to floodplain elevations, carving a seasonal channel. And then we got some flows out there. We got some kind of 7,000, 8,000 cubic feet per second flows in December that wetted up that area. And this kind of just stopped in December, but that drains back down, and kind of the concept of get out of the way, let the floodplains reactivate, and kind of reconnect the floodplain in that way to support the juvenile rearing fish. So we love those time lapses. Next slide. This is also showing looking upstream before and after phase 2. On the left-hand side is before, on the right-hand side is after. And you can see that middle training wall material removed, the channel graded down into that area, as well as the 2 sections of the main channel surrounding that. And you saw in that time lapse just prior how that area wetted up and drained out after inundation last December. Next slide. So for the final phases of project implementation, we're working through phase 3 right now, and phase 4 we aim to complete next year. We'll be removing 1.2 million cubic yards of sediment over the next 2 years, doing 34 additional acres of grading of seasonal habitat, and aiming to wrap that all up next year, and then continue on with monitoring. So that takes us to our monitoring section. So we set out to collect as robust of a monitoring data set as feasible at the time of the initial project planning, and this biological monitoring was led by our biologists at Kramer Fish Sciences. And so I'm going to be presenting some of the data that some preliminary data that we're finding as part of the post-phase 1 post-project monitoring. So this is all still kind of in a preliminary stage. We're still analyzing, finalizing, wrapping up the data, and then we'll be sharing more as time goes on. And the intent is also to be continuing to collect more data over the next several years to capture more environmental variability in water years, et cetera. So this is a teamed framework of implementation, effectiveness, and validation monitoring, where all these data sets work together to help answer questions related to how the site and the fish responded to doing the enhancement actions. And this is just a subset of the types of questions that were asked as part of our monitoring. But a couple of the questions related to fish communities was, will the number of juvenile fish increase, the juvenile salmonids we are targeting? Will the number of non-native fish decrease related to predators and what might eat the juveniles and what the juveniles might eat? Will predator fish densities or fish per area decrease? Will predation on juvenile salmonids decrease? Will the number of prey items or bugs increase? And will the number of riparian trees out there that can grow and survive within our habitat areas, what will that look like? Next slide. So one of the ways that the Kramer biologists went about asking these questions was by installing a channel spanning pike net for several weeks during the springtime. The pike is shown on the picture on the left. So they collect the fish at the downstream end and record data about the species, the size, and they do that before and after restoration. They can also, they also did this at a control or a comparison site that had similar conditions to our pre-project site conditions, but it's a site a mile downstream and we're not doing any work there. So it's purely for the sake of comparison. Our biologists also used these small rice grain sized transponders called pit tags that were carefully placed inside of hatchery juvenile Chinook. And then they released those fish. And then they looked at how many got eaten by predators. And they captured those predators using nets called seines. Once the predators were captured, their stomachs were pumped to show the contents of their guts and what they ate. So this is some examples of some of their work in the field and the fun days in dry suits, dragging nets around in deep water, looking for various species. slide. And then another method that they used was special nets called drift nets, installed in the channel to capture the drift or the bugs that might be floating by in the current and then can end up near or in a fish's mouth as food. These pictures just kind of give you an eye on the variability of field conditions might be expected, as well as going back to the lab and counting a lot of bugs. They've done a lot of work. So what have we seen so far? And this is, again, a very small subset of all the data we've collected. We don't have too much time to share everything, and we're also still working through our data, but this graph is related to the question, did the number of juvenile salmonids, Chinook, and steelhead increase? And so this graph shows a number of juvenile fish of the two species that ended up being sampled in the Fyke trap before the project and after the project. So the sets of bars on the left compared to the sets of bars on the right. It also shows the number of juvenile salmonids and the control site downstream, so that comparison site that I mentioned. And initial results show that there was an increase in Chinook as well as particularly steelhead compared to the downstream control site. And one of the things that we're still looking into, and it was a really interesting kind of unanticipated thing that occurred in our site, is that although the restoration actions were not specifically targeting adult salmonid spawning, we did see Chinook and steelhead spawning in the side channel that we constructed right after we finished up in 2020 as well as in 2021. So the fish are utilizing that habitat, and whether these fish that show up on this graph are from within the site and or upstream, we still need to have more information regarding that. But it was really exciting to see fish utilizing the site for spawning as well. Next slide. And so another result we wanted to highlight was the number of bugs in the water column available as drift, or available to drift by as fish food. So the pre-project condition is the right pair of boxes, gray and blue, and the post-project is the left pair of boxes. The thick bold line in the middle of the boxes is the median. The median represents 50% of the sample distribution. And so here the control is actually the main channel. So it's shown in the gray boxes. We're comparing the main channel to our side channel rearing habitat. And the project is the blue boxes. And so what we've seen so far is that we saw more bugs in the side channel, and we're also seeing more variability, which likely indicates more complex habitat and fish-like complexity. So we're seeing that as a benefit. And then lastly, wanted to show an aerial comparison related to riparian vegetation. So wanted to show pre-project and post-project conditions from the air as well as on the ground. We're looking at a large portion of phase 1 work here in this image. And so we just panned pre-project to post-project. Post-project, we see that the middle training wall is gone. We've lowered floodplain elevations. We've connected in the perennial channel, and then so the floodplain elevations are now lower and much closer to the groundwater. So if we zoom in to the location where the red arrow is on the ground and see a ground level comparison, the image on the left is from October of 2020. So recall that was when we were wrapping up our phase 1 fine grading, and so that's on the point bar, and you can actually see an island in the kind of background where you see a couple trees propped on top of that, and that is the degree to which we lower the floodplain in that particular area by 8 to 10 feet. And so then right nearby, you can see we're now real close to groundwater in that kind of low relief seasonal side channel swale running by there. It obviously looks like a parking lot. We just finished construction on October 2020. Go back out there to the same location. rotated around the view to that same feature of that floodplain island. It's now just looking in a slightly different direction, but we're in the same spot. We now see more herbaceous vegetation, emergent vegetation, naturally recruited vegetation, as well as the planted pole plantings that we planted out there are also starting to sprout out and and leaf out. So even in a drought year, couple drought years, we're seeing riparian vegetation is starting to take hold out there. So to wrap this up, initial signs of success, kind of going back to those 5 questions, subset of questions that we asked at the beginning. What we're seeing so far is more juveniles and adults of the Chinook and steelhead within our site, utilizing our site. Fewer non-native fish, fewer predatory fish, as well as no evidence of predation, even though we are continuing to see predation at that comparison site a mile downstream. More invertebrates or bugs available, and that the Chinook that are captured to look at whether or not they have food in their bellies. They do have more food in their bellies now compared to pre-project, which means there's likely some less competition across species, and the salmon are able to eat more. And we also have documented native riparian tree growth even in a drought year. So I'll hand it back over to Jeff.
Thanks a lot, April. That was awesome. When we think about this project, I just want to kind of try to sum up a little bit some of the key takeaways. When you talk to your family and friends about what you saw today and share a little bit about what this project is all about, that, you know, it's one thing to build a project, but it's important to monitor and gather data to show success that can help the development of other projects. And again, we mentioned that earlier, but it's real important, we believe, to gather the data in terms of a scientific body of knowledge that can be shared for other projects within the state. Additionally, these large-scale multi-benefit fish habitat projects can happen, and we're starting to see funding become available for more projects throughout the state. We're happy to help kind of show the way about how our project was developed, how it's been successful, and we don't just say that, but we show it with data. And finally, you know, teamwork makes the dream work. And with all of those folks that were listed on an earlier slide, Tykert, the resource agencies, Circle, all of our partners, it's truly a team effort. And I'll leave you with a thought about rivers in general. And, you know, if you look at a map of the United States and how our nation has developed over these 200+ years, so many cities have evolved along rivers, and rivers are key to economic vitality. There's provided transportation, provide water for agriculture, were needed to help sustain life. A key to any river system and those who rely upon the river is its ecosystem, the relationship between animals, plants, humans, and the fish that evolve there. And we truly believe that in an environment where fish grow and are happy, that's a sign of a great river system. And we're part of that. And we believe that to sustain Yuba County and its goals going forward, happy fish are part of a happy river system and an efficient system. And I think we're making fish a lot happier today. So with that, thanks for staying with us throughout your lunch hour. And I think we've got time for questions.
April, Jeff, thanks so much for that. Yeah, so we have about 15 minutes for questions, and we've received a couple. So I'll just start by the first one that we've received. So how much does this project lower river elevations during flood flows, and at what flow rates?
Yeah, so we looked at a range of flows from, you know, kind of more frequently occurring flows, like a 2-year event, all the way up to a 100-year event, which I mentioned has a 1% chance of happening in any given year. And water surface elevations are lowered by up to 3 feet for that highest flow event, and kind of anywhere from a half a foot to 3 feet for the range of flows within that. So we also looked at a 25-year, I believe a 50-year, and a 100-year. And so it just it was generally a reduction just because we're making more space for flood flows in that increased cross-sectional conveyance area by removing the training wall.
And then just to kind of tack on that same question, what is the impact on groundwater charge?
I have to get back to you on that one. We didn't look explicitly at groundwater recharge, though we did estimate groundwater to inform our design based on groundwater elevations that we obtained, data points we obtained from Teichert's ponds, as well as some of our modeling results and kind of pre-project mini excavations looking around the site. So, but yeah, not a recharge answer at this time. However, having the increased conveyance capability should theoretically increase the residence time of water on the floodplain, which would have the impact, we would think, of helping more water percolate back into the system. But I don't have an explicit answer on that one.
Okay. So when all this material is removed, where does it all go?
Yeah, so we showed a couple times the conveyor belts of material. Traditionally, when you implement a project of this scale, you're using trucks to haul material off site. We don't have to do that. It makes it very cost effective. So Teichert's aggregate processing facility is right on the north bank of the river. It is fed directly from the river, and in a few minutes, it's in an aggregate processing facility, gets worked through, the aggregate processing works, and then is directly being sold out to customers to help, provide materials for local implementation projects. So it's being sold on the market by Teichert.
Yeah, let me just add a little to that. And we've gotten this information directly from the Teichert folks that material that had been mined on one day was out and applied on a public works project somewhere in the Central Valley the next day. So it's really timely and efficient process to be able to take the material out, process, grade, and then it becomes concrete, asphalt, important material for public works projects throughout the region. So it's pretty exciting.
Yes.
That's very cool.
Win-win.
So another question that we received, what kind of challenges did you face during the planning process?
Oh, well, having worked on this project for a decade, I've probably forgotten half of them, but large and small. But I mean, there are a few. Planning wise, I mean, we had a really great setup and opportunity at the beginning with the landowner, so that a lot of times, planning, it's willing landowner. We've had a great situation there, so that really wasn't ever a concern. But I think one of the biggest leading into the permitting phase is hurdles that we had to jump was that the permitting regulatory framework in certain cases just isn't set up for restoration projects. So there are permits that are required for building a parking lot or doing all these other things, but we're not doing that. And so trying to fit our project in to check the boxes of permits that weren't, when they were developed, they weren't thinking about a restoration project. I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges that we've had to work through in the planning / permitting side of things.
Thanks, April. So another question, how often are you monitoring and sampling?
It depends on the data set, but so I'll give a little bit of an overview of the monitoring program right now. We did 3 years of pre-project data collection, 2014, 2016, and right before we started again in 2020. And they're typically kind of springtime data collection efforts for fisheries related, but then also we've been collecting things like water temperature, physical data throughout the year. So that kind of crosses seasons. And then for post-project data collection, we've got 4 years of post-project data collection funded at this time. And we are continuing to seek funding for additional post-project monitoring beyond that. Each of those 4 years is post phase 1. We did the data collection in 2021. We are wrapping up data collection for post phase 2. And then we have, so that's 2 of the 4 that we've already kind of worked through. And we have 2 more years of data collection after that. And we're trying to collect, the same data set across each of those years. And then once we get beyond that, seek funding to continue to monitor as far as we can into the future at a reasonable interval to help restoration science and other future projects.
And is there somewhere that, we could see this data or someone from the public could?
Yeah, so one of our partnerships with Central Valley Project Improvement Authority, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, or CBPI Improvement Act, there's a data portal that I believe that they're working on collecting data across the Central Valley, and we're working on packaging up some of that data to them so that they can be using that to help plan and study these projects across the Central Valley.
Gotcha. I think we have time for about 2 more questions. So one more is, are there plans to add additional acres of habitat after the project's complete?
Well, we would love to add more adjacent, but then we have to look at landowner situation, but they're immediately kind of downstream of the project. But I think that, Jeff is very aware of other projects on the Yuba upstream that aren't, necessarily contiguous with our project, but are aiming to meet the same goals as this project with very similar teaming partnerships at Long Bar, Upper Long Bar, Rose Bar, etc. So I think, and they have very kind of similar juvenile fish, juvenile salmon rearing habitat goals that will hopefully be doing, having similar effects, and hopefully are also learning from what we've done at Hallwood.
Yeah,
we're actually in there.
Yeah, there's one project in particular that's complete. The planning phase is completed. We're seeking grant funding now to do some spawning riffle enhancement up near the Narrows on Upper Rose Bar. Circle is our partner to help deliver that, and we're waiting on grant funding now, but we hope to be in construction on that project next spring. All goes well, so we're very excited about that. We definitely want to continue to do more projects in strategic locations, and this probably the next few will be above the Gare Point Dam, going up the system, upriver.
Yep, and I believe that the Long Bar project just began construction this week. And that's Fish and Wildlife Service, Circle, cbec, believe Yuba Water as well. So just trying to take the stamp and apply it in other places as well.
All right, and then I think this will be our final question. It's kind of jumping back to the permitting challenges. So have the permitting challenges that you previously encountered gotten any better, or have they improved in recent years?
Yes, I do think that they have. I think there's been an education component for the regulators that it's not just this project. Now there are other projects following on behind it, and it's not just the Yuba, it's other tributaries, especially, with these habitat enhancement type projects really becoming the, what we can get done relatively feasibly. And so I have been seeing more more exemptions for projects, or talk of, well, maybe we should, and this is where it's not so much the within the scope of our project team to tackle, but we've hopefully had something to say as far as like the burden that sometimes the current permitting scheme has put on projects like this. But I have seen slow improvements, but I do think, there's another decade of work to maybe get different legislation passed or whatever, so that permit language can change and let these types of projects go through without past challenges.
Great. Well, I think that about does it. We're about at time. So thanks again, April and Jeff. That was a great presentation. And thank you to everyone who tuned in with us today. And if you'd like, you can scan this QR code on the screen. That'll take you to Yuba Water's website, where you can sign up for future updates about news, events, things like that. And also just please be sure to follow us on social media at Yuba Water. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.